I'm Samantha Wilson, 28, and last Sunday I watched my parents hand my sister Caitlin the keys to my brand new Lexus. The look on their faces when I revealed I'd already signed the car over to someone else legally? Priceless. After years of watching Caitlin receive preferential treatment, I'd finally taken control. The sedan I'd saved for years to buy was legally protected from their manipulation, and for once, I wasn't backing down. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you've ever had to protect what's rightfully yours from family drama. I grew up in a modest brick colonial in a middle-class neighborhood in Brookline, just outside Boston. Our home was comfortable but not extravagant, 4 bedrooms, a small backyard with a wooden swing set my dad built, and a kitchen where my mom insisted on making Sunday dinners a mandatory family affair. To outsiders, we probably looked like the perfect American family, but beneath the surface, there were currents that shaped my entire childhood. My father, James Wilson, worked as a civil engineer. He was practical, methodical, and had high expectations, at least for me. He approached parenting like he approached his bridge designs, with careful calculations and safety factors built in. My mother, Michelle, taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school and had a warm, nurturing personality that somehow transformed when it came to my sister's needs versus mine. From early on, the difference in how they treated us was subtle but undeniable. I was the responsible one, the achiever, the smart Wilson girl who brought home straight A's and participated in debate club and student government. Caitlin, 3 years younger, was the sensitive one, the social butterfly who needed extra attention and understanding. Samantha can handle it, became my parents' unspoken mantra. Whether it was walking to school alone in 5th grade while Caitlin got rides until 8th, or babysitting my sister at 13 while she never had similar responsibilities, the pattern was clear. "You're just more mature," my mother would say, as if maturity was something I'd chosen rather than something expected of me. One particular memory stands out from when I was 16. I'd been selected as a finalist in the state science competition, culminating months of research and late nights. The awards ceremony fell on the same day as Caitlin's dance recital. She'd been taking lessons for about 3 months at that point. "We'll try to make it to your thing after Caitlin's performance," my dad promised. But they never showed. I accepted my 2nd place award with only my chemistry teacher applauding in the audience. When I got home, there was a celebration dinner for Caitlin's solo, which had apparently gone wonderfully. My science award was acknowledged with a quick "Oh, that's great, honey," as they passed the mashed potatoes. My best friend Zoe Baker was the first person to name what was happening. We met in 9th grade when we were partnered for biology lab, and she quickly became my confidant. Zoe had no filter and called situations exactly as she saw them. "Your parents play favorites like it's their job," she told me one afternoon after witnessing my parents brush off my acceptance to the National Honor Society while making a huge deal of Caitlin making the junior varsity cheer squad. "They don't mean to," I defended, though even then I knew she was right. "Doesn't matter if they mean to. They do it," Zoe responded, and that simple acknowledgement was strangely validating. The most telling incident happened when I was 17. After working weekends and summers at a local bookstore, I'd saved enough to buy my first car, a used Honda Civic with 80,000 miles and manual windows, but it was mine. I'd had it for exactly 3 weeks when Caitlin, who had just gotten her learner's permit, begged to practice driving it. "Just around the block," she pleaded. "Mom and Dad's car is too big." Against my better judgment, I agreed. 20 minutes later, she returned in tears, having sideswiped a parked car and crumpled my passenger side door. My parents' response? They covered her insurance increase and suggested I should have been supervising her more carefully. "You know how anxious she gets," my mother said. "You should have been more patient with her." No one offered to help with my repair costs. I drove that car with the dented door until I left for college, a daily reminder of where I stood in the family hierarchy. At Boston University, I majored in finance, determined to create independence through financial stability. I worked part-time throughout college, limited my student loans, and graduated with honors. My parents attended graduation, of course, but spent most of the day talking about how Caitlin was struggling to decide between community college and finding herself through travel. The day after graduation, I moved into a tiny studio apartment with barely enough room for a bed and desk. It was expensive for the space, but it represented something priceless: freedom from the constant comparisons and invisible expectations. I survived on ramen and store-brand cereal, but every decision was mine. Those first years were hard. Entry-level salaries in Boston barely covered rent, student loan payments, and basic necessities. While Caitlin lived at home, changing majors twice before settling on communications, I worked 60-hour weeks and picked up freelance bookkeeping on weekends. When my car finally died beyond repair, I took the tea for almost a year before I could afford another used vehicle. Through it all, I maintained the obligatory Sunday dinners, sitting through updates on Caitlin's latest adventures and achievements while my own milestones, a promotion, a small raise, paying off my first student loan, were acknowledged with polite nods. I told myself I was building something they couldn't see yet. Something that was entirely mine. 6 years passed in a blur of spreadsheets, client meetings, and gradual promotions. I moved from my entry-level position at Lambert Investment Group to senior financial analyst, then to account manager handling several high-value portfolios. Each step came with more responsibility and, thankfully, better compensation. I moved from my tiny studio to a one-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood, started contributing the maximum to my 401k, and built an emergency fund that would have made my most conservative clients proud. By my 28th birthday, I'd reached a milestone I'd been working toward since graduation. I was finally in a position to buy a new car, not just any car, but a Lexus ES, sleek silver with a leather interior and technology package. Nothing flashy or extravagant, but sophisticated and reliable, a tangible symbol of how far I'd come on my own terms. The decision to purchase the car wasn't impulsive. I'd researched models for months, comparing safety ratings, fuel efficiency, and maintenance costs with the same thoroughness I applied to client investment portfolios. I'd saved diligently, setting aside bonuses and living below my means to build a substantial down payment. My colleague Derek Patterson from the firm's auto industry division offered to accompany me to dealerships. Derek had previously worked in automotive sales before moving to finance and knew all the tactics dealers use to increase prices. "They'll try to sell you on the extended warranty," he warned as we walked through the Lexus showroom. Complete waste of money on a vehicle with this reliability rating. With Derek's expertise, I negotiated a fair price and favorable financing terms. When I signed the final paperwork and the salesman handed me the keys, I felt a surge of pride that almost brought tears to my eyes. This wasn't just a car, it was validation of every extra hour worked, every budget I'd stuck to, every sacrifice I'd made to build financial independence. "You earned this, Sam," Derek said, snapping a photo of me beside my new car. "Most people your age are drowning in debt, not making smart purchases they've properly saved for." That evening, I called my therapist, Amanda Harris, whom I'd been seeing monthly for the past 2 years to work through my family dynamics. "I want to show them the car," I admitted. "Is that silly? Seeking their approval still?" "It's not about approval," Amanda replied thoughtfully. "It's natural to want to share accomplishments with family. The question is, what expectations are you bringing to that interaction?" I considered her question carefully. "I guess I'm hoping they'll finally see that I built something meaningful. That my approach to life, planning, working hard, being responsible, has value. And if they don't respond that way," she pressed. "Then I'll be disappointed but not surprised," I answered honestly. "And the car will still be mine. My achievement doesn't require their validation to be real." Amanda smiled. "That's progress, Samantha." With newfound confidence, I called my parents and invited them for Sunday dinner at my apartment instead of their house. "I have some news to share," I said, trying to keep the excitement from my voice. "Is everything okay?" My mother immediately asked, concern evident in her tone. "Everything's great," I assured her. "I just want to host this time." I spent Saturday cleaning my apartment and preparing my mother's lasagna recipe. I even bought wine from a local vineyard my father had once mentioned enjoying. I wanted everything to be perfect when I revealed my news. Sunday morning, I received a text from Caitlin, "Can I bring Jake to dinner?" Also, running late as usual. Jake was her boyfriend of 3 months, the latest in a string of relationships that typically lasted half a year at most. I hesitated but replied that it was fine. My moment wouldn't be diminished by an extra guest or Caitlin's habitual tardiness. I parked the Lexus in a visitor spot visible from my apartment windows, angling it so the sunlight caught the metallic paint. Childish, perhaps, but I couldn't help orchestrating the reveal for maximum impact. As I put the finishing touches on the table setting, I felt a flutter of hope that maybe, just maybe, this tangible proof of my success would finally earn me the recognition I'd been seeking from my family for so long. The aroma of garlic bread and simmering tomato sauce filled my apartment as the doorbell rang at precisely 5 p.m. My parents were nothing if not punctual, a trait I'd inherited but Caitlin had not. "Something smells wonderful," my mother said, embracing me as she entered. She handed me a bouquet of mixed flowers, thoughtful but generic, probably picked up from the grocery store on their way over. My father followed with a bottle of mid-priced Cabernet. "Place looks nice, Samantha. Did you repaint?" "Just rearranged some furniture," I replied, taking their coats. "The light is better this way." We settled in the living room with glasses of wine. My mother immediately launched into updates about neighbors I barely remembered and distant relatives whose lives I was expected to find fascinating. My father periodically checked his phone for sports scores. The conversation flowed around me rather than including me, a familiar feeling. At 5:45, with no sign of Caitlin and dinner at risk of overcooking, I suggested we move to the table. "Let's wait for your sister," my mother said. "You know how she hates missing the beginning of things." I bit back a retort about Caitlin missing the beginning of literally everything and instead refilled their wine glasses. Just as I was about to insist we start, my phone buzzed with a text. "Car trouble. Can't get it to start. Dad, can you help? Jake trying but no luck. We're at my apartment." I showed the message to my parents. My father immediately stood, car keys already in hand. "We should go help her." "What about dinner?" I asked, gesturing to the table I'd so carefully prepared. "It'll keep, won't it?" my mother replied, already gathering her purse. "Your sister's stranded. She has Jake there, and she could call AAA, I pointed out, trying to keep frustration from my voice. "I made this dinner specially because I have news to share." My mother paused, her expression softening slightly. "What's your news, dear?" This wasn't how I'd planned it, but I decided to seize the moment. "I bought a new car. A Lexus. It's parked outside if you want to see it." "A new car?" My father looked surprised. "That's a big purchase. Are you sure that was financially wise?" Before I could explain my careful planning and saving, my mother's phone rang. "Caitlin, of course." "We're coming, sweetie," she said immediately. Then to me, "She sounds really upset. The car's making a terrible noise now. We really should go." "Actually," I said, making a split-second decision, "we can take my new car. I'll drive." 20 minutes later, we pulled up to Caitlin's apartment complex. She was standing beside her old Toyota, Jake crouched by the front tire. When she saw the Lexus, her eyes widened momentarily before she recognized us inside. "Oh my God, whose car is this?" she exclaimed as we got out. "It's mine," I said, unable to keep a hint of pride from my voice. "Just bought it last week." "Wow," Caitlin said, running her hand along the hood. "Must be nice to have that kind of money to throw around." Before I could respond, my father was already examining Caitlin's car, discussing the symptoms with Jake. Within minutes, he'd diagnosed a loose battery terminal, a simple fix that Jake completed under my father's guidance. "Crisis averted," my father announced. "Good thing we came when we did." Caitlin hugged him dramatically. "You're literally my hero, Dad. I was so scared I'd be stranded." "You were half a mile from a bus stop and have roadside assistance," I muttered, too quietly for anyone to hear. Back at my apartment, the lasagna was slightly dried out from sitting too long. Caitlin dominated dinner conversation with the trauma of her car trouble and her latest workplace drama at the public relations firm where she'd recently started as an assistant. "My boss is so demanding," she complained, helping herself to a third serving of garlic bread. "She actually expected me to stay late on Friday to finish a press release." "That sounds reasonable for a PR position," I commented. "Not everyone is a workaholic like you, Sam," Caitlin replied with a laugh that somehow made me feel both dismissed and criticized. Finally, as we moved to the living room for coffee, my mother remembered. "Oh, you mentioned you had news about your car, Samantha?" "Yes," I said, seizing the opportunity. "I researched for months and saved for years. The Lexus has top safety ratings and excellent resale value. I got a great interest rate too." "It's beautiful," my mother acknowledged. "Though I worry about you in the city with such an expensive car. The insurance must be outrageous." "I factored that into my budget," I assured her. "I can comfortably afford it." "Speaking of cars," my father interjected, turning to Caitlin, "that Toyota of yours is on its last legs. The battery connection was just the latest issue. The transmission is making noise too." "I know," Caitlin sighed dramatically. "But it's not like I can afford a new car on my salary. I'm barely making rent." My mother patted her hand sympathetically. "We know you're doing your best, sweetheart." There was a moment of silence, and I could almost see the thought forming in my father's mind before he spoke it. "Samantha," he began in his problem-solving voice, "since you have this new car now, have you considered letting Caitlin use your old Honda? It's not fancy but it's reliable, and it would really help her out." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. "Dad, I traded in the Honda as part of the down payment for the Lexus." "Oh," he looked genuinely surprised, as if the concept of a trade-in was foreign to him. "Well, that's unfortunate timing." My mother jumped in, "But your new car is so nice, and you live right on the T-line. You could easily take public transportation most days. Maybe Caitlin could borrow the Lexus when she needs it for work. Just until she can save up for something better." I felt a familiar pressure building in my chest, the same feeling I'd had countless times throughout my life when my needs were casually subordinated to Caitlin's. But this time, something different bubbled beneath the surface: resistance. "No," I said simply. "That won't work for me." "Don't be selfish, Sam," Caitlin chimed in, as if she'd been invited to this negotiation. "You know how important reliable transportation is for my job. I have to visit clients all over the city. And I drive to client meetings too," I countered. "That's why I bought a car that projects professionalism." "But you can afford alternatives," my father pointed out. "Your sister is just starting out." "So was I, 6 years ago," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "No one offered to loan me a car then." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Jake, to his credit, looked deeply interested in the pattern of my area rug, clearly wishing to be anywhere else. "Well," my mother finally said with forced brightness, "I'm sure we can figure something out that works for everyone. Family helps family, right?" As they prepared to leave an hour later, Caitlin lingered by the Lexus, peering in the windows. "The leather interior is gorgeous," she commented. "I bet clients are super impressed when you pick them up in this." "That's part of why I chose it," I acknowledged. "So," she said casually, "about borrowing it sometimes." "We'll talk about it later," I replied, already knowing what my answer would be. As I watched them drive away, my father at the wheel, my mother in the passenger seat, and Caitlin in the back already engrossed in her phone, I realized with perfect clarity that this conversation wasn't over. They would be back with more reasons why Caitlin's need for my car outweighed my right to enjoy the fruits of my labor. And for the first time I began to formulate a plan to protect what was mine. The moment my family's car disappeared around the corner, I called Zoe. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. They want me to let Caitlin borrow my brand new car, I blurted when she answered. A car I haven't even made the first payment on yet. Of course they do, Zoe replied, unsurprised. What did you tell them? I said no, but they're not going to accept that. You know how they are. They'll wear me down until I give in just this once, and then suddenly Caitlin will have my car 3 days a week. So don't give in, Zoe said simply. Easy for you to say. Your family respects boundaries. Boundaries aren't given, Sam. They're enforced. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. The memory of my 17th birthday resurfaced with painful clarity. Caitlin had received a designer handbag she'd been coveting, while I got a practical desk lamp for studying. When I'd mentioned the disparity, my mother had said, "You've never been interested in fashion, honey. We got you something you'd actually use." That pattern had repeated throughout our lives. Caitlin's desires were treated as needs, mine were treated as optional. And now they expected me to hand over my new car, the most significant purchase of my adult life, the symbol of my hard-won independence, because Caitlin couldn't be bothered to maintain her own vehicle or budget for a replacement. Not this time. I stayed up until 2 a.m. researching vehicle ownership laws in Massachusetts. I learned about title transfers, liability concerns, and the legal rights of vehicle owners. By morning, I had a plan. Monday during my lunch break, I called Brian Mitchell, a lawyer who had helped with contracts at work. I explained my situation, feeling slightly embarrassed about bringing family drama to a professional contact. Actually, this is more common than you might think, Brian assured me. Family members assuming access to assets they have no legal right to is something I see regularly. So what are my options? I asked. Several, actually. You could add a named driver exclusion to your insurance policy, specifically excluding your sister. That would mean if she drove the car, even with your permission, any accident wouldn't be covered. That seems risky, I said. What if there was an emergency and she genuinely needed to drive it? Another option is a temporary transfer of ownership to a trusted friend, Brian continued. The title would be in their name for a period you determine, making it legally impossible for you to loan the car to anyone. Would that affect my financing agreement? It might. We'd need to check the terms. But there's a simpler option, a documented loan agreement with a specific third party. You maintain ownership, but have a legally binding document showing the vehicle is already committed to someone else's use when not being used by you. The more we discussed it, the clearer it became that temporarily transferring the title to a trusted friend was my best option. It would be a clean break. Legally, I wouldn't be able to loan the car to Caitlin even if I wanted to. The decision would be out of my hands. That evening, I called my friend Natalie Coleman. Unlike Zoe, who was fiercely protective but sometimes confrontational, Natalie was diplomatic and level-headed. We'd met in college and bonded over being responsible oldest children. She understood family pressure without judgment. "Let me get this straight," she said after I explained my plan. "You want to temporarily sign your brand new Lexus over to me so your family can't pressure you into letting your sister drive it?" "Exactly," I confirmed. "It would just be on paper. I'd still keep and use the car, make all the payments. But legally, it would be yours for 3 months." "And what happens if I total the car while it's in my name?" Natalie asked practically. "The insurance would still be in my name, with you as the primary driver. All liability would be covered." She was quiet for a moment. "Sam, have you considered just telling them no and sticking to it?" "You don't understand how they operate," I said. "They'll show up unannounced. They'll create emergencies. They'll make me feel like I'm hurting Caitlin by not helping her. And eventually, I'll give in because that's the pattern. But this seems so extreme." "It's not about the car, Nat. It's about breaking a lifelong pattern. I need to do something drastic enough that I can't backtrack." After more discussion, Natalie agreed. We met with Brian the next day to draw up the paperwork. Within 48 hours, my Lexus was legally registered to Natalie Coleman, with an agreement to transfer it back to me in exactly 3 months. I made copies of all the documentation and placed them in my desk drawer at home, in my filing cabinet at work, and in a digital folder on my cloud drive. That night, I sat in my apartment feeling a strange mixture of emotions: guilt for what might seem like a deceptive action, anxiety about the confrontation that would inevitably come, but beneath it all, a powerful current of something new: empowerment. "I'm taking control of my own life," I told my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman who looked back at me seemed different somehow, shoulders straighter, eyes clearer. For once, I wasn't waiting for my family's approval or permission. I was protecting what was mine. The next morning, my mother called to invite me to Sunday dinner at their house. "Dad and I have been talking," she said casually, "and we think we've found a solution to everyone's car situation." "What solution?" I asked, though I already knew. "Why don't you come on Sunday and we'll discuss it as a family? Caitlin will be there too." As I hung up, I felt the familiar pull to please them, to keep the peace at any cost. But the title transfer papers on my desk told a different story. For once, I had chosen my own well-being over family harmony, and there was no going back. Sunday arrived with the crisp clarity of early autumn. I drove to my parents' house in the Lexus, savoring what might be my last peaceful family gathering for some time. The familiar street with its neat row of colonial houses hadn't changed since my childhood. My parents' maple tree still dropped golden leaves across their immaculate lawn, and Mrs. Peterson next door still had too many garden gnomes. My mother answered the door with a warm hug, the scent of her signature pot roast wafting from the kitchen. "Perfect timing," she said. "Your father just opened a bottle of wine." In the living room, my father was arranging a cheese platter, an upgrade from the usual chips and dip, which immediately put me on alert. Special appetizers meant this was a special occasion in their minds. "There she is," he said with unusual enthusiasm. "Our financial wizard. How's work going?" "Busy but good," I replied, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "We just landed the Peterson account." "That's nice," he said, clearly not registering the significance of a client I'd been pursuing for months. "Caitlin should be here any minute." "She's bringing Jake again, nice young man." The subtle comparison wasn't lost on me. At 28, I was single, my last relationship having ended 6 months ago when my boyfriend took a job in Chicago. My parents had never said outright that they worried about my romantic prospects, but the frequent mentions of friends' children getting married spoke volumes. Caitlin arrived 20 minutes late, bursting through the door in a flurry of activity. Sorry. Traffic was insane, and then Jake couldn't find parking. Jake followed behind, offering a sheepish smile and a bottle of wine to my father. Unlike Caitlin, he seemed to recognize the tension simmering beneath the surface pleasantries. Throughout dinner, my parents maintained an almost aggressive cheerfulness, asking about my work with actual follow-up questions and complimenting my recent haircut. Caitlin kept shooting me strange looks, a half-smile playing at her lips that made my stomach tighten. Finally, as my mother served coffee and her apple crumble, my father cleared his throat. "So, we asked everyone here today because we've been doing some thinking about the car situation." "What car situation?" I asked innocently, though my heart was racing. "Well, as we discussed last week, Caitlin's Toyota is really on its last legs. The mechanic says the transmission could go any day, and the repair would cost more than the car is worth." "That's unfortunate," I said, taking a deliberate bite of apple crumble. Meanwhile, my mother jumped in, "You have this beautiful new Lexus, but you live right on the T-line and work downtown where parking is so expensive." I remained silent, waiting for them to reach their inevitable conclusion. My father continued, "We think we've found a solution that works for everyone. We'd like to help Caitlin with a down payment on a reliable used car." This wasn't what I'd expected. For a moment, I felt a surge of hope. Had they actually recognized that my car was mine and found an appropriate solution? Then my father reached into his pocket and pulled out a key, my spare Lexus key, which I'd foolishly left in my old bedroom drawer during a visit weeks ago. In the meantime, he said, handing the key to Caitlin, Samantha has agreed to let you use her Lexus when she doesn't need it. Since she takes the T to work most days, that should give you a reliable vehicle for work while we car shop. Isn't that generous of your sister? Caitlin's face lit up as she took the key. Really? Oh my God, Sam, thank you. This is perfect. I have a client meeting in Cambridge tomorrow that would have been a nightmare on public transit. All eyes turned to me, expecting the usual acquiescence, the familiar pattern of Samantha sacrificing for Caitlin's benefit. My mother was beaming with satisfaction at having solved the problem. My father looked pleased with himself. Jake looked uncomfortable, perhaps the only one sensing that something wasn't right. I took a deep breath. I never agreed to that. My father frowned. We discussed it last week. Your mother and I thought. You thought wrong, I interrupted, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I never agreed to loan Caitlin my car. In fact, I explicitly said no. Don't be selfish, Sam, Caitlin said, clutching the key. It's just until I can get something else. You don't even use it every day. It doesn't matter if I use it or not. It's mine. I paid for it. I make the payments on it. Samantha, my mother said in her teacher voice, family helps family. You've always been so responsible. Your sister needs this right now. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder of documents I'd brought. Actually, there's something you should know. I can't loan Caitlin the car even if I wanted to. What do you mean? My father asked, his expression darkening. I mean the car isn't legally mine at the moment. I slid the title transfer papers across the table. I temporarily transferred ownership to Natalie last week. The car is registered in her name for the next 3 months. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's face went from confusion to shock to hurt in rapid succession. My father picked up the papers, examining them as if they might be forgeries. You gave away your new car? Caitlin finally asked, disbelief evident in her voice. Not gave away. Transferred temporarily. I still use it, still make the payments. But legally, it belongs to Natalie until January. I can't loan it to anyone without her permission. This is ridiculous, my father exploded, throwing the papers down. Why would you do something like this? Because I knew this would happen, I said, gesturing to the key still clutched in Caitlin's hand. I knew you'd decide that my car should be Caitlin's car, regardless of what I wanted. You took my spare key without asking and handed it over without my consent. We were trying to help your sister, my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. We thought you'd want to help too. I'm happy to help Caitlin in ways that work for me, I replied. But not by giving up something I worked years to afford, something that's important to me. I can't believe you did this, Caitlin said, finally setting the key down. You went behind everyone's backs and, what? Signed your car over to a friend just so I couldn't borrow it? That's so extreme. What's extreme is expecting me to hand over a brand new car I haven't even made the first payment on, I countered. What's extreme is taking my key without permission and acting like you have the right to make decisions about my property. My father was still examining the documentation, his engineering mind clearly trying to find a loophole. This seems legally binding, he finally admitted. It is, I confirmed. Brian Mitchell handled the paperwork. He's one of Boston's top contract attorneys. So you went to all this trouble, my mother said slowly, just to make sure your sister couldn't use your car in an emergency? No, I corrected her. I went to all this trouble to establish a boundary that I knew you wouldn't respect otherwise. Based on what just happened, I'd say I was right. A boundary? My father's voice rose. This isn't about boundaries, Samantha. This is about you being unwilling to help your sister when she needs it. Dad, I've been helping Caitlin my entire life, I said, feeling years of resentment bubbling to the surface. I've been the responsible one, the one who never needed reminding to do homework, the one who worked through college, the one who built a career without asking for handouts. So this is about jealousy, Caitlin interjected. You're punishing me because you think Mom and Dad favored me? This isn't about punishment, I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. This is about me finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of being expected to sacrifice for you. Sacrifice? My mother looked genuinely confused. Samantha, we've always been so proud of how independent you are. Independent by necessity, I corrected her. Not by choice. I had to be independent because all the family resources, emotional and financial, went to Caitlin. That's not fair, my father protested. We supported you through college. You paid half my tuition, which I'm grateful for. But when I needed a car repaired junior year, you said you couldn't help because you were paying for Caitlin's study abroad program in Italy, a trip she decided on last minute and nearly failed because she barely attended classes. That was different, my mother said defensively. Caitlin needed the cultural experience to find her direction. And I needed reliable transportation to get to my 2 jobs. But my needs were always secondary. You're being dramatic, Caitlin said dismissively. So Mom and Dad helped me out sometimes. They helped you too. When's the last time they offered to help you with anything, Caitlin? Actually helped, not just enabled poor decisions? Jake, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, suddenly stood. I think I should wait outside, he mumbled, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding. No, stay, I said. You should see what you're getting into with this family. Samantha, my mother gasped. That's unkind. No, what's unkind is teaching one child that her needs don't matter while teaching the other that she's entitled to whatever she wants. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. That's enough. I won't have you speaking to your mother that way. Or what, Dad? You'll take away my car? Oh wait, you can't, because I protected it. The words came out sharper than I intended, but years of suppressed feelings were finally finding voice. I can't believe you're making such a big deal over a car, Caitlin said, rolling her eyes. It's just a thing, Sam. It's not about the car. I exclaimed, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. It's about respect. It's about acknowledging that I have the right to make decisions about my own life and my own property without having to justify them to you. My mother's tears were flowing freely now. We've always wanted what's best for both our girls. No, I said quietly. You've always wanted what's best for Caitlin, and you expected me to want that too. You expected me to be okay with always coming second. That's not true, my father insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? When I got into Boston University with a partial scholarship, your first question was how it would affect your ability to send Caitlin to her dream school 2 years later. When I bought my first apartment, you suggested I get a 2-bedroom so Caitlin could move in if she needed to. Even my achievements have always been viewed through the lens of how they might benefit her. A heavy silence fell over the table. My father looked stunned, my mother devastated. Caitlin stared at her plate, her expression unreadable. If that's how you felt all these years, my mother finally said, why didn't you ever say anything? I tried. Dozens of times. But you always dismissed it. Don't be so sensitive, Samantha. Your sister needs more support, Samantha. Family helps family, Samantha. So instead you went behind our backs with some legal maneuver, my father demanded. Instead of talking to us like an adult? I am talking to you now, I pointed out. And look how you're responding, with anger and accusations rather than listening. I'm angry because you didn't trust us enough to have a conversation before doing something so extreme. Trust is earned, Dad. And frankly, you've given me no reason to trust that you would respect my decision about my own property. My father pushed back from the table abruptly. If this is how you feel about your family, maybe it's better if you go. James, my mother exclaimed. Don't say that. No, it's fine, I said, rising from my chair. I think we've said everything that needs saying for now. So that's it? Caitlin asked, finally looking up. You get to make this big dramatic statement and then just leave? This isn't drama, Caitlin. This is me finally standing up for myself. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe ask yourself why. I gathered my purse and the folder of documents, leaving the spare key on the table. As I moved toward the door, my mother followed. Samantha, please, she said, catching my arm. We're still your family. We love you. I know you do, I replied, softening slightly at the genuine pain in her eyes. But loving someone means respecting their boundaries, not just when it's convenient, but especially when it's not. But the car, she began. Is mine, I finished firmly. And I get to decide who drives it. As I walked to my Lexus that was temporarily in Natalie's name but still mine in all the ways that mattered, I felt lighter than I had in years. The conversation had been painful, and the road to rebuilding these relationships would be long, but for perhaps the first time in my life, I had stood my ground without backing down. I started the engine, the smooth purr a reminder of what I'd built for myself. As I pulled away from my childhood home, I caught a glimpse of my parents and Caitlin standing in the doorway, looking somehow smaller than they had before. In the rearview mirror, they diminished further, until they were just a tableau in the distance, still my family, but no longer the arbiters of my worth. The week following the confrontation passed in a blur of emotional exhaustion and unexpected peace. I threw myself into work, finding comfort in the orderly world of numbers and projections where outcomes followed logical patterns. My phone remained conspicuously silent, no texts from Caitlin, no calls from my mother asking when I'd be at Sunday dinner. By Wednesday, I began to wonder if I'd permanently damaged these relationships. The thought brought both sadness and a strange sense of liberation. That evening, I met Zoe and Natalie for dinner at our favorite bistro. So you actually did it, Zoe said, a note of admiration in her voice. You finally stood up to the Wilson family hierarchy. I didn't just stand up to it, I replied, sipping my wine. I basically took a sledgehammer to it. Natalie, ever the diplomat, asked gently, do you regret it? I considered the question carefully. I regret that it had to come to this. I regret that I couldn't find a way to express these feelings earlier, in a less dramatic way. But no, I don't regret finally speaking my truth. Have they reached out at all? Zoe asked. Radio silence, I said. Part of me is relieved, but another part is terrified I burned bridges permanently. Healthy boundaries often feel like burning bridges to people who benefited from their absence, Natalie observed. Give them time to adjust to the new reality. The following Saturday, I met with Amanda for an emergency therapy session. I recounted the confrontation in detail, still processing the intensity of the emotions that had surfaced. I feel guilty, I admitted. Was the car transfer too extreme? Let's reframe this, Amanda suggested. You recognized a pattern of behavior that has caused you pain throughout your life. You anticipated, based on past experience, that this pattern would continue. And you took steps to protect yourself. That's not extreme, that's self-care. But using legal means seems so cold. Sometimes clear documentation is the only language that gets through to people who aren't respecting verbal boundaries. You tried words for years. They didn't work. As I drove home in my Lexus, still legally Natalie's for another 2.5 months, I felt a growing sense of peace with my decision. The car represented more than transportation, it symbolized my right to make choices about my own life without having to justify them to anyone. 3 weeks after the confrontation, my mother texted, "Miss you at Sunday dinners. Your father made his brisket this week." It wasn't an apology, but it was an opening. I replied, "Miss you too. Maybe we could meet for coffee sometime, just us." We met at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with superficial updates and careful avoidance of the elephant in the room. Finally, my mother set down her latte. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began hesitantly. "About always putting Caitlin's needs first." I waited, not rushing to fill the silence. I don't think we ever meant to make you feel less important, she continued. Caitlin just always seemed to need more attention, more guidance. You were so capable, so self-sufficient. We thought you were fine. Being capable doesn't mean not needing support, I said quietly. It just meant I found ways to manage without it. She nodded slowly. Your father and I have been talking about this a lot. He's processing in his own way. You know how he hates conflict. I know. He's not ready to discuss it yet, but he did say something that surprised me. He said he wasn't angry about the car anymore, he was sad that you felt you had to go to such lengths to protect yourself from us. The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just needed to break the pattern. I understand that now, she said, reaching tentatively for my hand. And I'm trying to see how we contributed to that pattern. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start, an acknowledgement that my feelings were valid, that my perspective mattered. A week later, I received a text from Caitlin, got approved for a car loan. Dad's helping me look this weekend. Want to come? I declined the car shopping invitation but suggested lunch instead. We met at a diner we'd both loved as teenagers, the neutral territory making it easier to breach difficult subjects. I've been thinking about what you said, Caitlin began, stirring her milkshake. About me being entitled and stuff. I shouldn't have said it like that, I conceded. I was angry. No, you were right. She looked up, and I was surprised to see genuine reflection in her eyes. I never really thought about how things looked from your side. It was always just normal that you were the responsible one and I was not. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy, I suggested. The more they treated you as needing help, the more you came to expect it. Yeah, maybe. She fidgeted with her straw wrapper. Anyway, I found a Honda Civic I can afford. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. Well, mine and the bank's for the next 5 years. That's great, Caitlin. I'm proud of you. She looked startled, as if my approval was unexpected currency. Really? Really. Taking responsibility for your own needs is a big step. Our relationship remained tentative, the years of ingrained patterns not easily undone. But there was a new awareness between us, a recognition that old roles could be questioned and perhaps, eventually, redefined. My father took longest to come around. 6 weeks after our confrontation, he called me directly, a rarity, as he usually let my mother handle family communications. I'm not good at this kind of talk, he began gruffly. But I owe you an apology, Samantha. You do? I was so surprised I couldn't formulate a more eloquent response. Yes. I've been thinking about what you said, about us always expecting you to be the responsible one. And looking back, I can see how unfair that was. We put adult expectations on you from a young age and then, well, we never adjusted as you actually became an adult with your own life. Thank you for saying that, Dad. I still think the car thing was extreme, he added, unable to completely concede. But I understand why you felt backed into a corner. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. In December, a week before I was scheduled to transfer the car back to my name, I took it for a long drive along the coast. The winter sun glinted off the ocean as I wound my way north, the smooth handling of the Lexus making the journey feel effortless. I thought about the past months, the painful confrontation, the awkward reconciliations, the small steps toward more authentic relationships with my family. None of it had been easy, and none of it was complete. But for the first time in my life, I felt seen by my family as an individual with valid needs and boundaries, not just as the responsible one expected to accommodate everyone else. As I drove back to Boston, windows down despite the chill, I realized that the most valuable thing I'd gained wasn't the uncontested ownership of my car, it was the knowledge that I could stand up for myself without the world ending. That boundaries, once established and maintained, could actually lead to healthier relationships. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to say no when saying yes would only perpetuate harmful patterns. The Lexus would officially be mine again in a week, but in the most meaningful sense, it had always been mine, a symbol of my independence, my values, and now, my willingness to protect what mattered to me. And that, I realized as the Boston skyline came into view, was worth every difficult conversation, every uncomfortable confrontation, and every painful revelation. Because in protecting what was mine, I had finally claimed my most valuable possession, my own sense of worth. Have you ever had to take drastic measures to protect your boundaries with family? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. I'd love to know I'm not alone in this journey. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even when it's difficult. Thank you for joining me for this chapter of my life, and remember, sometimes the most important person to be loyal to is yourself.